With this now, I would like to invite Dr. Vijay Patil. Dr. Saab is a medical oncologist, ex-TMH, and currently he's working with the Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai. And he's also director of Sunrise Oncology Center in Mumbai and, Sunact Center. Dr. Saab, I would request you to now lead the panel and
Yeah, so let me invite my dear friend Dr. Hasmukh Jain, who is a professor in Tata Memorial Hospital. Hasmukh, you are there. If you can just on your video. Dr. Saravana, if you can, again, a dear friend, a surgical oncologist from Namakkal. If Saravana can also on his video. Dr. Venkat Radhakrishnan, the head of Department of Medical Oncology at Adyar and one of the pioneer in pediatric oncology in India. Dr. Srinivas Chilukuri, who is a professor and a senior consultant in Apollo Proton Cancer Center and an expert in proton treatments. Dr. Ramana, who is an active cancer patient. And Mrs. Urvashi Prasad, who is the director of Niti, Aayog, New Delhi. Vivek, everyone is here?
Yeah, except Dr. Saravana.
Okay.
He said that he's joining in a while. Urvashi ji is here, but she won't be able to switch on her camera. But she's here. And
Okay. So I can't see Dr. Hasmukh. Dr. Hasmukh is there?
He was there. Let me just give a call to him. He was there. Probably because of some network issue,
Yeah, okay,
he might have dropped.
So we will start. No issues. We can pitch in Aayog. Aayog is also there. I can see Aayog. They also been there. So the first thing, and can we move the slides, Vivek, to the next slide? So
Sure.
the topic we are going to discuss is patient advocacy and the role in access to newer therapies. And let me start with asking Aayog. Aayog, how important is targeted therapy or immunotherapy in patients with cancer? How important do you think is that these therapies need to be given to these patients? Aayog, you are muted.
So, am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible, Aayog.
So like any treatment modalities which we talk about for treatment of any disease, we have to balance the efficacy and toxicity of those therapies. And there is how the research happens and development happens, that we move on from, as our understanding of the molecular pathology of a disease comes on, we move on from a therapy which is non-specific to a therapy which is specific. So when we are treating our patients, our aim is not just to give an efficacious treatment, but to give a safer treatment as well. And there is where the role of these targeted therapies and immunotherapies, which are based on understanding the basis of the disease, comes in, where we can give personalized treatment to the patients, hereby improving their treatment outcomes, but decreasing their toxicities so as to give them a right to good quality of life while they are on treatment. So they are utmost important armamentarium in our medical oncologist.
To summarize, what you're saying is that targeted therapies and immunotherapies are important. Let me go to Venkat. Venkat, when you look at therapies like immunotherapies and CAR-Ts and targeted therapies from pediatric oncology point of view, how important, or hematology point of view, how important are these?
So I work in a charitable hospital, and patients expect us to cover everything, including targeted therapy and immunotherapy. So it all depends on the finances. When the hospital is paying, then we are looking for bang for the buck. We cannot pay treatments which are very expensive, treatment which do not prolong survival that much, that is statistically significant but clinically insignificant. Then in that case, the more traditional transplants and chemotherapy become important. But if you're in a setting where money is not a question, the parents are willing to pay, you definitely not deny them, because any treatment, even in few months, can prolong life or improve quality of life. Definitely should be given. So it has to be based on the patient, the sponsor, the physician. So it's quite complicated. There's no simple answer to that.
Okay, so what you're saying is that if finances are not an issue, if access, let's say that access to these new therapies are not an issue, you would prefer to do these therapies in your patient. Am I?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Saravana is here. Saravana, surgery is most traditional way of treating, and robotic surgery has improved things dramatically. Do you really think that robotic surgery where indicated needs to be provided to the patient?
Currently today, if you cannot apply robotic surgery to the entire spectrum of patients currently in its current form and the cost factor. But nowadays, see, earlier around 10 years ago, what we used to be, it was difficult for us to convince patients for laparoscopic surgery. Today, patients want laparoscopic surgery. And in our place, we are in a two-tier place. Now I am seeing people are asking for robotic surgery. So in 10 years time, probably the cost factor and the demand from the population, the patient population will match together. And at that time, I think it will be an ideal situation where everyone, because we have an Indian robot which has come into the market just in the last year, and it has decreased the cost of robotic surgery by almost half. And more, as just like your generic drugs for chemotherapy decreases cost of treatment, even in these high-end technologies like robotic surgery and proton beam, in time, all these will come into acceptance. Today, we do around 20% of indicated cases who really that robotic surgery is indicated in those patients. Only 20% of the patients can afford and take robotic surgery in our institution.
Okay. Now, let me come to Dr. Hasmukh. Hasmukh, you did the study for CAR-T. Now, do you think that CAR-T showed such excellent results in second line and beyond setting that this is a very important achievement?
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. Yeah, I think it is important because considering the kind of patients where this works, where with the current available options, the outcomes are so dismal that median survival is less than 6 months, that even if you have a 30-40% chance of cure, that definitely becomes a very significant improvement.
Srinivas, the medical oncologist told the importance of neotherapies. Saravana has stressed the importance of robotic. I want to hear from your perspective. In radiation, proton beam therapy is something which is new in our country. So what's your opinion that how important is proton beam therapy?
So Vijay, in general, all technologies are important, and therefore we need to know which technology has to be used at which indication and in which situation it needs to be used. And probably for expensive treatments, not just proton therapy, but all these expensive treatments, we need to know where it should not be used, where the value addition is very little, where the value proposition is very minimal. So, but all these technologies, including proton beam therapy technology, adds value to patients, in selected patients. Of course, in selected patients, all these technologies improve either direct cancer outcomes or they improve the quality of life of patients using them.
Fantastic. So what we heard from experts is neotherapies are important, whether it's surgical, radiation, or medical related. And Saravana also touched upon the point that in his setup, only 20% patients in whom robotic is indicated can have access to robotic. We had a study from Tata which shows that immunotherapy, targeted therapy, only 3.8% can benefit. Srinivas, can you tell us some figures that if 100 patients, let's say they are medulloblastoma children and they need proton, how many of them in the country can afford proton?
I'm sure it is less than 1% of childhood cancers would probably have access. I mean, I'm not talking about actually getting treated, but actually even coming to the proton center, I think less than 1% would be doing.
Right. Hasmukh, any ballpark figure that now we know that the study which you did with the IIT brought down the cost of CAR-T very I won't say very low, but substantially lower than what it was. But out of 100 patients who require CAR-T, how much would be the ballpark figure who could afford them?
Yeah, at the current pricing, I think about 5% would be able to afford this. Yeah.
Now, this is my next question to all of you, and we'll start from Srinivas, then Saravana, and then Hasmukh can take the question. What are these hindrance factors? Is finance only the hindrance factor? that if the cost comes down, we can use it, or there are other hindrance factors also?
So Vijay, I'll not talk only in the context of protons, but I also talk in the context of radiation therapy or advanced radiation therapy techniques in general. And there are, as you rightly said, cost is one of the hindrance factor, but also the, because treatments such as radiation therapy needs prolonged stays. They are not single day treatments, although things are improving because of shorter fractionations. Also, patients have to stay in a place where they have access to better technology for a longer duration of time. I think that becomes a big hindrance factor for radiation oncology perspective. So I think the cost and logistics in terms of access, quick access or close access. The third being awareness, understanding where is the benefit and how much is the benefit and how to get that benefit is also very poorly understood by many of our patients, including physicians as well. And therefore, I think these are the three top hindrance factors.
Saravana, any other point to add? We talked about very nicely. Cost is one factor, accessibility is one, and awareness. Any other thing which would you feel that would training of more doctors would better improve the access?
I would just add one point because I do a little bit of administration myself. See, when you have alternates for any particular procedure or disease, you have protons. What is the alternate for proton? Who cannot afford proton? You have an alternative which patients are going to choose. If you have in surgery, robotic surgery, if they can't afford, they're going to have laparoscopic surgery or they're going to have open surgery. It is not the end of the road. So as an administrator, we are willing to invest in technologies or treatments which are going to drastically change the outcomes of the patients. And as long as multiple, see now Apollo has Proton, and if really you want to create an impact in access, you need more people in the country installing Proton for it really to become accessible and to drive the cost down. So if we have blockbuster kind of treatments which are radically going to change the outcomes of the patients, most hospitals are willing to invest. It is because there are one administrator told me recently that 15-20 साल से हम लोग सर्जरी कर रहे हैं और ये robotic surgery अभी आया. What difference it is going to make? So unless the administrators and the people who are making these institutions also believe in the technology, I don't think it will go to the masses. You will have, yes, centers of excellence like APFCC, like Tata, who are investing in these technologies, but then accessibility cannot be guaranteed because a few people are doing it. So I want to say that along the way, if everybody is invested in a smartphone, mobile phone today, everybody has a mobile phone. When the technology is applicable to all people, then all these things will move forward. More and more people have to come up.
That's an interesting point. I thought you would talk about learning curve for surgeons. You talked about learning curve for administrators.
It is very easy. It is very easy to operate using a surgical robot. It is very easy. It is easier. It is just similar like open surgery. Laparoscopy is difficult, but the cost will make you innovate, right? So most of the people, Indian surgeons are one of the best laparoscopic and thoracoscopic surgeons in the world. We are one of the best. So when you have an alternative that is equally good or just marginally inferior, most of the people say, why I need a robot? I'm doing the same thing using
fair enough. So what you are saying is, unless it is dramatically improving outcomes,
yes,
and then something like what CAR-T did.
Yes.
So let me go to Hasmukh. Apart from the price, what do you think would help the CAR-T programs in this country to come up and do well?
Yeah, so I think one would be, because this is personalized therapy here, there's a little bit of a different challenge that every patient would need a product to be manufactured for that particular patient. And even though you can scale up this whole process, but there's only certain extent to which it can be scaled. So, I mean, there need to be, of course, multiple manufacturing sites, either from the same group, or you preferably would need multiple groups, multiple companies, so that you can keep the manufacturing times within what is acceptable. That I think is one challenge. Second is, of course, the training, because this requires transfer of skill sets. This requires transfer of SOPs, and there is a learning curve here, particularly for some of the complications which are not very common. So you need to treat at least 50-60 patients before you you see the whole spectrum, and then you're ready. Because in some of the complications, like in hemophagocytic syndrome happening because of CAR T-cell therapy, your rapidity of response could decide whether the patient will survive or not. So these are the parameters which will actually help us improve the access.
Okay, so that's good. That's a learning curve, and manufacturing should increase.
Yes.
So let me ask to this questions, and let me come to Venkat for this. Venkat, does this happen often in your institute that you know that the patient cannot afford it, and let's say that the treatment is blockbuster, you know that, let me give an example of osimertinib in EGFR mutant or lorlatinib in ALK. Does it happen that sometimes you even don't explain the options because the patient should not feel bad that he does not have the money, so he cannot afford that treatment?
We used to do that in the past, but in the current scenario of medical, legal, and all other issues, we do tell the patients whatever available options are. Things have changed now with the consumer protection. It's very difficult to judge who can pay and who cannot pay. Suddenly, the patient might turn around and say that if you had told me, I could have afforded it. So we do tell that these are options, but they are very prohibitively expensive, and give them the choice whether they want to take it or not.
Now I have a question for Srinivas, Saravana, and Hasmukh, all three of them, and then I'll go to the Mr. Raman for this. Now, Vivek, can you just put the next questions on the slide? Can we rationalize these therapies? So we know that in few situations, let's say not in all, but in some situations, these are absolutely important. Let's say for a transplant in a primary refractory Hodgkin's, or in a medulloblastoma, a proton, or a robotic where Saravana feels that, okay, this in this patient is going to benefit, or a CAR T in a second line in ALL with CD19 positive. Can we have some rationalization where we could deliver this even to those people who cannot afford it, that we don't have financial discrimination here? Do you think, is this possible in the country, or this is not at all possible? We can start from Srinivas.
Yeah, it is possible, Vijay. I think we should have some bare minimum indications for all these expensive technologies which need to be responsibly used. And therefore, the insurance and the governments and, all these agencies can reimburse only those key indications. It is easier said than done, because obviously, there will be a tendency to keep many things in this, and very difficult to extrapolate results from the West directly into India. But I think straightforward indications should be rationalized for these expensive therapies.
Saravana?
We, because we are a small organization and we are in a remote place, we use CSR a lot. So for example, if I know a prostate, for example, or a sleeve lobectomy, a case where you need to do an anastomosis, these are very complex operations to do by open surgery or by even laparoscopic surgery, a perfect indication for robotic surgery. So what we have partnered up with a few NGOs is, okay, there is a need for these patients. So we match, okay, they pay for this, and we use CSR to bridge the gap of these treatments. We are trying to...
You are already rationalizing the therapies and your own way.
We have a mechanism in which we have a committee which decides. It's not like as if I am a surgeon, I want to do more robotics. So I have to put my patient to that board, and the board will rationalize whether this patient really deserves, and then the CSR comes in. So the CSR is only if you have a board committee which is deciding on the particular case, we will give you money. People are there to give you and support money for many causes, and this is how we bridge that gap.
So let me jump on to the next question, and let me get Dr. Rao here. Dr. Rao, so do you think a committee, let's say patient advocacy group formed by experts and with patient involvement and with administrator, and I would want comments after Dr. Rao, Mrs. Prasad also, would help to make a broad program kind of thing? Okay, these are neotherapies. These are absolutely essential in this situation, and if we get recommendations from patient advocacy groups or a group which has patient advocates, experts, and then we can think about having a program to subsidize this substantially or provide it.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
I'm Ramana Rao. Can I speak?
Yes, sir, please.
By the way, I am not a medical doctor. I am a professor in engineering.
Okay.
And it's very rare that a cancer patient is ever given a chance. Even here, you have given me the last opportunity to speak.
No, so the rest of the questions are for you only.
I'm actually a cancer patient who is waiting for, expressing our concerns to a forum like this, whereas it's a very rare case. And I represent thousands of people. And actually, 16 years back, I had a surgery for my kidney cancer. And I was all right for 10 years. Then suddenly in 2006, I had 2017, it has become metastatic. It has gone to pancreas and other places. At that stage, the doctor decided to give me targeted drug. So I've been using RCC for RCC targeted drug since last 6 years. And I'm very happy to say that I got excellent result. So I'm a practical case. It's not just a theory about it. Definitely, it is a little costly, but then it is still something that saves a lot of trouble, a lot of effort. It's a very long process, the curing of cancer. So what I do is I regularly send my record online to my doctor, and he gives me online advice. So there are two things which I want to just advocate for. Number one, doctor should have definitely confidence that targeted drugs are useful and it can be given. And second thing is that there are so many new drugs coming. The last 10 years, plenty of new drugs have come, just like your awesome archbishop. And people, they are much better in their approach. And I found very few doctors actually recommending these things on the pretext that they are costly. Well, I think the cost of this drug compared to the cost of surgery and all that effort is not that big. And the only method for reducing the cost of it is to advocate it with the government to accept it as a part of HBA so that more people will start using it. Now it is not even covered by insurance. So if it is covered by insurance, it becomes easier for people to get, more people will use, and due to economies of scale, they will become, less costly and cheaper. So I'm advocating mainly for this. And the second thing, if you care to listen to me, is there is no record at all digitally available for any patient. You see, unfortunately, most of the hospitals, except very few, have no digital records. Then it becomes impossible for the doctor to give advice from a longer distance. And digital records help us not only simply for the patient, but to reduce the doctor's time. They got excellent clinical support systems, which can help the doctor himself. And, the effort should be to reduce the time of the patients and improve his quality of life than simply having hundreds and hundreds of patients' footfalls in the hospital premises. So that's what I wanted to convey. These two I've been advocating since last 3 to 4 years. Well, with very little outcome as usual, because as an individual, I can do very little. But I've been counseling patients and all of them agree. Even doctors said, please go ahead with advocating this particular case. Then only the result will come. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Urvashi, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm also speaking as not someone who's just policy person, but I'm myself a trained public health professional and also someone who's living with stage 4 ALK positive cancer. So I can speak from all these different perspectives. And I would say that it definitely requires a collective effort. I mean, there is no doubt that, governments obviously have a huge responsibility in this space, and there is a lot that governments can and should do. I think that is definitely something that, we can never get away from. But of course, the governments have this challenge where in a lot of the cases, we are starting, and we have started even in the last few years, still from fairly fundamental levels, when it comes to cancer care. Even certain basic treatments are still not accessible to people in many parts of the country, let alone, the extremely targeted therapies that we're talking about, like lorlatinib, which is, also a drug I'm on. So, so I think, it's for governments, it's really starting from that very basic and building up. So I think that is something that will always remain a challenge for a country as large as ours. So I think it's multiple things. It's obviously government, but it's also obviously trying to find as many cancers as possible at earlier stages, because then, as we know, that treatments are much easier, less expensive. The cure is much better. Of course, in my type of cancer, 90% of the times it is detected at stage 4 because, you don't have any kind of regular screening or risk factors for this. And so, in certain cancers, we can't help it, and they are diagnosed at a metastatic stage. So that, of course, makes it very complicated. But in the cancers that we can, we should obviously try to catch them as early as possible. That will always remain our best bet in a country as large as ours. We cannot afford to have millions of people coming to us with stage 4 cancers. We'll never be able to have enough money on the table for that. So that is why, the prevention aspects, the early screening, that is where a lot of the thrust of the government has to be. And that is some of the discourse that we've been trying to shift in the last few years. Then, of course, I think, even insurance, pharma companies, they too have a responsibility.
Yeah.
In terms of,
Vivek,
like
put the next slide, because this issue is on the next slide.
Yeah. So, so insurance, because I personally struggle a lot with my insurance and what they reimburse and what they don't reimburse. A lot of them are not even aware of these newer treatments. For the longest time, they would keep calling my targeted therapy as chemotherapy. And so they would, not be able to even understand what is the difference between chemotherapy and targeted therapy. So, we're still grappling with these very, very basic, and this is for someone like me. So you can imagine what it would be for the majority of people in the country. So I think even the insurance companies obviously need to get their act together and need to upgrade their knowledge. And need to make sure that they have knowledgeable people on board to take these calls, in terms of treatments, etc. So that too needs to be done. And that is also something that we're trying to work on. So I think it has to be a collective effort for something which is as difficult, complicated as this. It cannot be any one entity which will be able to solve for it. We'll have to combine efforts from all the different stakeholders. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely correct. So one of the questions which we wanted, and Vivek, can we go to a slide back? Is now there's Aayog here. Aayog, do you think participation in research can improve access to these drugs?
So definitely. So one of the hindrances when we discuss these lot of neotherapies is that most of these are done not on Indian patients. So to justify, so there are a lot of resistance which comes that the results or outcomes might not be applicable to the Indian population. So a research first will make that doubt clear that yes, this works in this type of population also, Indian population also. Secondly, the research will make it accessible to more and more patients as a part of the research, and that will increase the awareness of various support groups, the government as well. So the research definitely will act not as the only thing, but act as a part of the collective effort to improve the access to these treatments.
Okay, fair enough. Dr. Rao, do you think patients, if given an opportunity to participate in research in which these newer drugs are been getting access, would be happy to participate? Dr. Rao, you're there? I can see Ganpati ji there, and I can ask this question to, he's also in. Ganpati ji.
I'm available, please.
Yeah.
Hello.
So go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I'm 84, so I need a little bit of time more. No, definitely it will help. First of all, as the other doctor said, patients should know that there are new technologies. For that, there should be sufficient amount of, there should be some organization like social work department, because doctors do not have time to explain all these things. You hardly have 3 minutes to spend to a patient. So a good social work department can give the various options that are there, and I'm sure number of patients will definitely choose. In my case, that has happened. I was told about it and I said, yes, okay, I'll find money to spare for that. And then surprisingly, my case was registered as a research case, the drug supplier is supplying it free of cost for me since the last 4 years. Because they need data and I'm able to supply regularly. I keep my data completely, all test data, everything in graphical form and keep on posting them. What are my actual blood reports, LFT, all the different reports, and my personal, physical phenomena. And these things definitely help a lot.
Agreed. Ganpati ji, your thoughts?
Sorry, I came in just when you uttered my name.
So we are talking about access to newer therapies. Many of them are costly. The question is, we know that we cannot have a magic wand and increase this access immediately.
Correct.
So would patients be happy if they are given these newer therapies in research setting?
I think that's the big challenge also. And I think, it depends on the patient's level of education, level of literacy, etc., to understand what the trial is. Because when they join, they think this new medication is going to help me and I'm going to come out of the disease. It might not be the case in many situations. So I think a very honest communication. But yes, as a treating doctor, we must keep the options open. But as I told you, even though I'm a PhD, if a doctor has to tell me something, I'm vulnerable. I'm going to believe the doctor more than my own thing. So, and hence, the doctor should play the cards very safe, and you must say that this will help. We are trying to find out whatever is the outcome of this. Okay, and we are very happy that you will be contributing to the society through your participation, is what we would look at. I think it there is no what do you call a blanket statement that I can make that yes, all the patients will be happy to do that. Nor can I say that nobody will do it. It's not the question. It requires a lot of counseling, and that's one of the things that we do in our NGO. Besides the fact that we give them a lot of information about the disease and the new therapies, etc., we also tell them that what should they be considering the pros and cons of this. And if you're getting somebody who is absolutely illiterate, does not know anything, then I think I don't know whether we are doing really a great thing or a harm that you're doing is what we're supposed to look at. That's my thought.
Okay.
Sorry, Vijay. I don't know whether I said it correctly.
No. Your thoughts are welcome, Ganpati ji.
Thank
What you and Dr. Rao suggested is that communication, if done properly, then you could have more. My question, this is to Urvashi ji. Urvashi ji, can we think about having patient advocacy groups which actually can, with the expert, think about which are the therapies which are required and they cannot be regularly covered in Ayushman Bharat, and can Niti Aayog help us with development of such advocacy groups?
Yeah, I think, there are obviously, I think there's already some groups which exist, but we need a lot more, definitely. And I think, a lot of the times our efforts are focused at the national level, and that is obviously fine because a lot of the decisions, especially for centrally sponsored schemes like Ayushman Bharat, etc., are made at the central level. But I think sometimes we forget the state government level, which in a country like India is just as important, sometimes even more important. There have been states where, the central government is only providing, X amount of support, but the state government is, further topping it up with a lot more support from their side. So we need to also push state governments that, you also need to do your bit. And not just rely on the central, and the central sponsored schemes. So I think that those efforts of advocacy need to be not just at the central level, but equally at the state level, because that we can perhaps make a bigger and quicker difference. You know, things can happen more quickly at a state level than perhaps even at the national level.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Vijay,
So,
quickly
Vivek,
add,
yeah, Ganpati, sure.
to quickly add to this, the umpteen number of support group that we have been having online can be channelized as one of the point to have a very focused interventions of advocacy group, and it's very important. Having said that, to each individual, his disease is his own, his experience is his own. So I think we should also be able to empower that support group by talking about what happens, when we have an advocacy group, what are we advocating for, why are we advocating for, and how does the society at large, come to win in this situation, is what I think we should do. I think we should focus our support group. Vandana Mahajan's support group meeting is what we have to look at. Thank you. Thank you.
Correct. Correct. So I think, Vivek, what has come out is that neotherapies are important, and there are certain neotherapies which actually change the course of life. At present, we have efforts like what Saravana is doing at his level, Srinivas is doing at his level, Hasmukh is doing at his level. We have individual efforts which have been done, but we need a cohesive platform where these efforts can be taken care. And I think we should have a white paper coming out of this, where we should think about volunteers who can come over the board. We would need much more patient advocates, and probably one advocacy group is not going to help. We might need a separate advocacy group for head and neck, a separate for lung, a separate for every site, so that there is that information. Even experts nowadays are experts in one cancer, and the same expert cannot be there everywhere.
Right.
So we would need such multiple advocacy groups which can then talk about patient rights, and that voice might be much more stronger than only us among doctors speaking amongst ourselves. With that,
Absolutely.
I thank all my panelists. I think I have grossly overshooted the time which was given to me, but it was a lovely panel, and I learned a lot more new things and more point of views today. Thank you all. Vivek, over to you.